Hi, everyone. My name is Jan Lehman. I am the CEO and visionary of CTC Productivity, and I'm super excited that you're here today. Our goals with working with companies is to help companies create a culture where productivity fuels happiness. And we do that by focusing on software and soft skills. And I'm super excited today. You're here to join us. We're going to be talking about the power of Microsoft 365 and how to leverage that suite of tools. Whenever I do a presentation, I always start off asking the audience to question and think about what are your three most valuable resources? And inevitably, where we lead to is we talk about the three T's: time, talent, and technology. My opinion is those are your three most valuable resources. So, time, hands down, most precious resource, and time is the end zone for a productivity consultant like me. It doesn't matter if we're teaching you how to effectively delegate or effectively run a meeting. It's about getting time back in your day, being the most productive version of yourself you can. Technology is one of the most underutilized resource, and I'm super excited. We're going to talk about Microsoft today. But the way it fits together is when you're smart about maximizing your time and you're smart about leveraging technology, then you're going to get all this time back in your day. And then and only then could you ever consider maximizing your talent or the talent of your team. Instead of putting out fires all day long, responding to emails all day long, everybody's actually doing their most important work. And that's what we're striving to do. Now, I love this quote from the Wall Street Journal. The Wall Street Journal tells us that office workers, so your knowledge workers, are wasting almost half their workday because they weren't taught organizing skills to deal with the demands of today's environment. Now, organization is the key word within this particular quote. I personally believe that's the foundation of productivity. If your data is organized and you can find things fast, you're going to be more productive. If your to-do list is organized, you know exactly what to work on when, again, you're going to be more productive. So huge areas of opportunity. And it's this organizational theme, quite honestly, that got our attention with the Microsoft 365 suite and how to use it to actually help people be more productive. Now, most companies barely scratch the surface of leveraging their technology. When I'm coaching a CEO or a senior leader, I'm typically coaching them on something like email. And 95% of the time, they'll make the comment, I wish somebody would have taught me this 30 years ago when I first started using email. So even with the older technology that's been around, there's huge opportunity to leverage it more fully. But with the Microsoft 365 suite, we're probably at like a 2 to 5% utilization rate that we see within businesses. Companies just are unaware of the power of that particular technology. Now, whenever we talk about tech, we always want to start from a business perspective. And so I love this study from Deloitte Consulting, and I purposely still use this study, even though it's from 2018, because it was perfect timing for it to come out because it came out right before the pandemic. And so, what Deloitte tells us is that really we've been going through a transformation and we have been going from this red box to the orange box. Now, what do we mean by that? Well, a lot of things have been able to be automated for individuals over the years. And this is even before AI became such an important thing. And so people now can step forward and work on more complicated issues in their business because technology has allowed them to automate repetitive tasks. And when people are stepping forward to work on more complex issues, typically they're working with other people, and typically it's across functional lines. So Deloitte says we've been going from this sort of functional silos over to more of a network of teams. And you've probably seen that in your business as well. We have more project teams, committees, different things going on within organizations. The same thing is true on that y-axis. A lot of companies figured out they were really efficient within the four walls of their business. And now they're like, you know what? We have customers and vendors we work with on a daily and weekly basis. Why don't we streamline our workflow outside of the four walls of our business and improve things there? Now, when you think about moving into working more in a team environment, what do you think are some of the challenges that you face within your organization? The ones that we typically hear start with communication. So when you have people working together, it becomes more complicated. You now need to keep people in the loop. You need to update people. It's not just communicating in your head with what you're going to do. Collaboration is another one. Like, where are we going to work together? How are we going to work, especially if it's a remote hybrid situation? How are we going to do this, right? So collaboration becomes a bit more of a challenge in a team environment. Next is planning. So hopefully you are all planning in your head when you're planning your own work. But when we start to work with other people, planning becomes much more sophisticated. I might plan to get something done on my part of the project and I'm going to pass it to somebody on Friday. And they might say, hey, I'm going to the Bahamas on Friday, right? So now I need to back up and get my part done sooner. So that planning is a much more sophisticated in this team environment. Same is true with prioritization. How do we decide what we should actually work on when we're on a bunch of different project teams? And then accountability is a really big one. And we sort of joke going into the pandemic that a lot of leaders realized that they were managing by working around. So if they could see their people, they assumed they were productive. Now, in this hybrid remote world, they're like, I can't see my people. How do I know they're being productive? My personal opinion is if you can't see your people and you don't trust them, you probably shouldn't trust them in the office either, quite honestly. It's really a work ethic thing. People can kind of fake it really well even when they're in the office. So just a little comment there. But because of this, there's been a huge insurgence of task management tools that have come out because we need better ways to keep people accountable, better ways to track how people are getting work done. You shouldn't really worry whether when somebody's working or where somebody's working. If they've got 10 things they have to get done and they get the 10 things done, we should all be happy. So accountability has become a bigger challenge in this post-pandemic world, and the need for task management tools has increased. Then there's that organizational theme. So organization is really fascinating. It's a real personal thing. The way we look at how we would organize something is very personal. But when we're talking about working in a team environment, there needs to be a broader understanding of how we organize. You might be working with somebody and they put something on the network drive in a place that to you is illogical, and they name it something, it just doesn't even make sense for you. So having more of a strategy across the organization on how we're going to organize information and all this that everybody understands and can follow is super important when we talk about working in the team environment. And then we always joke that if any of those things above are not working, there's death by meetings. So if we're not communicating effectively, let's call a meeting. If we're not keeping people accountable, let's call a meeting. So we often joke that it's a big red flag whenever we come into an organization and there's back-to-back meetings with internal groups or there's overflowing email inboxes. Those are big red flags that there's an opportunity to leverage Microsoft 365 more fully. So this is all the software you're probably paying for. It depends on your licensing, and some of the stuff at the bottom might be an add-on cost. But the general point with this is there's a lot of software you're probably not aware of within your suite of tools. So the first step is what you want to really do is understand what you're paying for. And if you're paying for a third-party app, that actually could be that you could do the work with the internal Microsoft 365 software and not pay for a third-party app. That makes sense, right? Why would you pay for those subscription fees? But on top of that, the other reason you'd want to use the Microsoft suite of tools is because of the built-in integration between the suites. That's what drives productivity, when things automatically happen and connect between all the various apps. And then the third reason that you'd want to consider using the Microsoft 365 suite is Copilot, Microsoft's AI tool. So all of us should be exploring AI tools now. Why you want to explore Copilot over other AI tools is Copilot actually will use your data within your Microsoft 365 environment. And as your engineers and individuals are brainstorming with AI, when you're brainstorming with Copilot, it's going to keep that brainstorming and all that information confidential and safe within your Microsoft 365 environment. So that alone has gotten a lot of people's attention to get rid of third-party apps for those reasons and go all in with Microsoft suite of tools. Now, my personal opinion and my team's opinion is that what Microsoft is doing is creating what we call a communication and collaboration hub for these teams of people to work together more efficiently. And all of us were pushed onto the technology when the pandemic hit. And probably your organization started off using Zoom, and then your IT group said, hey, wait a minute, Microsoft has a meeting video tool. We should just start using that and get rid of Zoom. And that was actually good news, because now your toe is actually dipping in the water and you're looking and exploring, and people in your organization are probably starting to explore and play with the other apps within the Microsoft 365 suite. Now, one of the things to realize, if you didn't know this, is everything that's happening in email today for internal communication and collaboration is actually going to leave email and go into a more appropriate app within the Microsoft 365 suite. And that is big news. So email is going to stick around for internal communication and collaboration, but for external communication and collaboration, but everything teams are doing internally would be in these more appropriate apps. So for instance, we now have a few new communication tools. So we just used to have the phone and email. Now we have chat and we have channels. Now, one of the things that's really critically important is every company needs to come up with what we call your macro organizational plan. Because unless everybody across the company understands what tool to use when, there's going to be confusion, which impacts productivity. So that's a really important aspect of what you want to do. And every company can come up with the way they want to do it. There's a million ways to do everything in Microsoft. But I'll give you an example of where we might steer you in the way that you would define your macro organizational plan. So it would be logical that email would continue to be a tool that you use externally. And then chat would be actually a really good tool to use for quick chit chat, internal conversations, more private conversations. You wouldn't have your meaty conversations in there, and you wouldn't delegate tasks in there. You would delegate tasks in a task management tool. Something like a channel, if you've never heard the term, but think of a channel as a process or a topic where there's a lot of meaty conversations. And so there could be a lot of conversations. There could be documents that you're collaborating on related to that topic or that process. And it would be appropriate to have those meaty conversations within the channels so they build up to be what we call your knowledge base. So today, what's happening is you might have somebody retiring from your company, and all those meaty conversations were actually happening in email. And when they retire, email goes away. Now, what's happening is when you're having the meaty conversations actually within the channel, then you onboard somebody new to the business to replace that person. They now have access to all of that history within those particular channels because it is a knowledge base that builds up over time. And the search within Microsoft Teams is significantly better than the search within Outlook. So it becomes this place for collaborating and pulling information. Then there has to be the data component. So this is another area where we see companies make a mistake. So a lot of companies will hear about the great features of getting your documents over on the cloud, and often they will move all of their documents off the off the network drive over to what we always call one big fat SharePoint site. That is not what you want to do. You actually want to move the documents off the network drive over to the SharePoint site that sits under that particular team. Every time you create a Microsoft team, it creates a SharePoint site under the team. So you'd want to move the documents that the executive team needs access to over to the SharePoint site that sits under the executive team. Then you're creating the most efficient and effective communication and collaboration hub where the discussions, the documents, and everything are put together. And you want that foundational piece in place first before you start layering on other apps and features. Next, then you can start to layer on these features. So something like OneNote, it's a digital notebook. Many of you maybe have been using it for years personally, but now is a time to consider using OneNote, a digital notebook, in a team environment. So a very logical thing that might go into OneNote might be meeting minutes and agenda items, or think of them as like reference information, could be client notes. And so it's not dialogues and discussions that are going on in chat and channels, but it's information people might be referring back to periodically. And so think of OneNote as the place where you store reference information. So again, meeting minutes and agenda items might be a really good example of that. And so this is another example of what we call creating your rules of engagement or your operations manual for how your company is going to use the Microsoft 365 suite so everybody is super clear. Then there's also all these task management tools, and I wish we had more time to go in and explain all the different task management tools that are out there. We're doing webinars on that, so check out our webinar channel to see about that so you can learn more about the task management tools. But there's tons of money being invested into task management tools in the Microsoft suite. And then lastly, then there's a shared calendar for that particular team as well. So thank you for being on the call. I hope that gives you kind of a foundational understanding of what Microsoft is doing and maybe where there might be some opportunity for your business. I would be very happy to hop on a call with you free of charge if you want to pick my brain, ask some questions, talk about how you get the ball rolling, how you might go about adopting the software. Happy to do that. Just fill out our contact page, click on the or scan the QR code and fill out our contact page, and I'd be happy to hop on a call. Or maybe you want to check out our Microsoft 365 webinars. We've been doing them for many years. So you can go through and look at our history of the various apps and different things. Or I would also encourage you to check out our case studies. They're always written under the lens from our client's perspective of what was their business issue, what did we help them do within Microsoft 365, and what's been that ROI from actually invested in that particular software. And then there's also a link to go buy my book if you have an interest. The book talks about Microsoft 365 and also a lot about the soft skills side of driving productivity. So thank you for being here, and I'm glad you're here. Thanks.